Spatz, and I am an alcoholic, and I'm a member of the, what am I a member of?
South Dixie Virtual Group.
South Dixie Virtual Group. This is my security blanket here. So every once in a while.
Emotional support person.
That's right. Because I'm 75 years old, and I'm my 44th year of sobriety, and I'm not even sure where I'm at most of the time. The mind's gone, So I used to be smart, and AA and time helped me get rid of that. So when I was the smartest guy in the room, I was always also the drunkest guy in the room. Funny how that works, Smart will kill an alcoholic. I've seen more alcoholics die who are intelligent. Big difference between intelligence and wisdom that I found. You can read a book and be intelligent, and you can go to. That was mysterious. There's a difference between you can read a lot of books and be intelligent. I went to school. I graduated with departmental honors in mathematics. I was going for a PhD in algebraic topology. Went to law school. Division chief. I was an intelligent guy. I had a lot of degrees. That old story. It's a true story. I told my sponsor I was terribly under-sponsored. I was supposed to be sponsored by Jesus or Albert Einstein, and instead they gave me a used car salesman that didn't even graduate the 6th grade from Chicago. And I'm in my office one day, and on my wall I have literally 20 diplomas and degrees or something like that. And I said, Bob, these are my degrees. And he looked at me and said, well, Russ, rectal thermometers have degrees. You know what they do with those? So that was pretty much my story with the people in Alcoholics Anonymous that sponsored me or mentored me. So, but you'd be surprised how intelligent you can be and how you can screw up your life. It's pretty amazing, What do they say? It's not good for us to grouch or the brainstorm. That's how I operated life, as a grouch and a brainstorm. And difference between intelligence and wisdom is acquired over a period of time by repeated humiliations and the final crushing of our self-sufficiency. So I'm just going to share with you, hopefully, some of my wisdom that I've found during the years. You may not think it's wise, or maybe you'll just have to wait about 20 years to figure it out for yourself. But my sponsor said, Russ, when a man with experience meets a man with money, which I thought was right up there with oxygen. When a man with experience meets a man with money, the man with experience will walk away with the money, and the man with the money will have walked away with an experience. And so I may not say much, but I'm going to just tell you my experience, because my whole thinking, if you can call it thinking, I try to do that as little as possible. They say in the big book, it says what happens when we get involved in something called inspirational thinking, which I think is sort of like spiritual wisdom. Inspirational thinking, it says it's a very unusual thing when it first happens. It's sort of like amazing to us, but it says it becomes a working part of the mind, and we come to rely upon it. And so it's a good thing I'm relying upon that most of the time, because intellectually I'm gone to the cleaners. It's over for me, I don't remember much of anything, but I'm just going to share a few things with you about wisdom. There's an interesting thing in Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers. Dr. Bob was asked, was talking, and he says, and so you don't get all bothered about this, or get bothered, it's okay. I don't want to stop you from getting upset. Dr. Bob was asked what the whole thing was about, and he said, well, the books we found absolutely essential. They would use words like that, thoroughly followed our path, absolutely essential, was 1 Corinthians 13, Sermon on the Mount, and the book of James. And that's what they used to use. 1 Corinthians 13, Sermon on the Mount, and the book of James. If you ask Dr. Bob what he meant by first things first, he'd say, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all will be revealed to you. All will be added to you, and that's the books they used. And there's a great line in the book of James about wisdom. Very interesting line. It coincides with a lot of things they say in the big book, which I never really thought of, because I never even read those stuff or looked at that stuff until I was 20, 25 years sober. And the line goes like this: if you want wisdom, how many people would like to be wise? you know, and, have people go up to you, call you up on the phone that you don't even know, like from Canada, the United Kingdom, and they say, you don't know me, but I listen to your tapes or I do stuff like that. I'm just talking about, he says, yeah, and I'm Joe, and I'm calling you from Vancouver, and do you mind if I ask you a question? I said, sure. He says, well, I got about 25 years, and I got this problem, and they ask you a question, because he thinks I have wisdom, I suppose, or something. I don't know what it is, and they ask you a question, and you talk about. This is what it says in the book of James. It says, if you want wisdom, all you have to do is ask God. Did you know that? That's all you got to do. It doesn't say think hard about it. I know a lot of alcoholics that do a lot of thinking. I know they're thinking. They think a lot. You ever find yourself thinking a lot? Have you ever noticed that whenever you're thinking a lot about something, it doesn't feel good? Have you ever put that together? Whenever I have somebody call me up and they're suicidal, they got 20 years and they're suicidal, they got 30 years and they're suicidal, they got 17 years and they're suicidal, and they're all exercised over something that's happening to them or happened to them or may happen to them or somebody in their life or something like that, and they start going at 1,000,000 miles per hour, and you can't even stop them. I mean, you're going so fast, they're talking so fast, you say, whoa, 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 whoa. And then I ask him this question. I said, you've been doing a lot of thinking about this, haven't you? And he says, yeah, how'd you know? And I said, yeah. I had a gal call me up recently, and she said, I'm sorry to bother you. I said, no, you can call me up. He said, I wouldn't bother you except I'm desperate. I said, so you got to be desperate to call me up, huh? He says, absolutely. So this is what it says in the book of James. So listen to this. This is very interesting. It says, if a man wants wisdom, and remember, this is one of the books they said was absolutely necessary. Because if you've ever 12-stepped people, and I've 12-stepped and sponsored a lot of people, the one person you can never get through to is the person that'll always interrupt you because they think they're smarter than you. They say things like, yes, but, you don't understand. When they say yes, but, what they really mean is they haven't really been listening to you because you obviously are not smarter than they are. Or they say things like, you don't understand. They're calling you up for advice. Their life is a wreck. They're going down the tube. So they call you up for help. They want you to help them not to commit suicide because they're crazy. So they know enough to call you up, and then as you're trying to help them, they interrupt you and say, no, you don't understand. Because they realize you don't understand because they know you're about to tell them something that you don't want to hear. They don't want to hear. And so what it says in the book of James is if a man or a woman desires wisdom, all you have to do is ask God, which, by the way, if you understand about the theme of asking God, it's like all through the big book. Believe me, it's there. It says all you have to do is ask God, and he said we'll give it to you generously. He wants to give you the wisdom, just like a sponsor wants to give a sponsee wisdom. Don't you want to help people? When you got 5 years, 10 years, don't you want to help people? You all ever try to help an alcoholic who's not ready for the help? I was once told, I said, you can't help anybody unless they need help, want help, and ask for help. You ever see somebody all screwed up, or they may even come up to you and ask for help, and you try to help them, and they interrupt you 15 times, and they're not listening, and there's nothing you can do, because they're just not listening. So it says, if you want wisdom, all you got to do is, number one, ask God. He'll give it to you generously. He says, but when you ask God for wisdom, you can't have any doubt. That's a big thing in the big book. Being convinced. We are now at step 3. If you want to be rocking in the fourth dimension of existence, if you want to know much of heaven, if you want to know peace, the great fact is this and nothing less. God has to be the central fact of your life, the most important fact of your life, and you must be convinced that he lives in your heart and mind in a way which is indeed miraculous. Doing for you what you can't do for yourself. Half measures will avail you. What does half measures avail you?
Nothing.
No, is that what the big book says? Nothing? Doesn't say 50% or anything? Nothing. You know what the book of James says? Because this is the stuff they were reading before they read the book. It says, but if you ask God for wisdom, it says, you cannot have any doubt. The man who has doubt, or the woman who has doubt in faith in God, can expect to receive nothing. You think that's kind of drastic? Is that sort of like half measures avail you nothing? Is that sort of like you get rid of the old ideas, the result is nil? Is that like God is everything or he's nothing? Is that like there is one who has all power? Is that like thoroughly followed our path? Is that like burn the idea? It's almost like they're serious about this shit. Serious about this stuff, you know. It says the man who has doubt can expect to receive nothing. He's like a wave in the ocean, unstable in all his ways. Has anybody ever, you guys know any alcoholics? I can tell you one thing about alcoholics, they're unstable in all their ways. An alcoholic without belief, you can do all the steps until the cows come home, whatever it is. They're unstable. You can never rely on them. Somehow, some way, they're going to fail you. Do you think it's possible to have 50 years in Alcoholics Anonymous, going to meetings and be unstable?
Oh, yeah.
Do you think it's possible to have 20 years in Alcoholics and be unstable?
Oh, yeah.
Think it's possible to have 5 years going? I'm not talking about the guys that you hear about that you guys believe. I know you guys believe the only thing you have to do is go to meetings and not drink and you'll stay sober. That's a lie. That's a lie from the pit of hell. But nobody knows that's a lie because nobody stays sober. Maybe 1% of people that come in here stay sober more than 20 years. You stay sober more than 20, 30 years, you look and you see who's around. You see that most of the people never even make it to that. I heard a guy, when I was coming up through the ranks, the statistic I was told is 1.5%, 1 out of 200 stay sober for more than 20 years. There was a guy at a meeting the other day who ran treatment centers, and they said, this is the statistics he came up with, and I haven't figured out, I think it's about the same thing. He says they did a study at this one treatment center. They had, on 1 year or whatever it is, they had 336 people that came into this treatment center. It's a big treatment center, and they did a tracking, and after 5 years, only 30 were still sober. And then I said, thinking about what I was told, well, how many were sober after 20 years? He said, because I was told 0. He says, no, 0 was sober after 15 years. Out of 336, 0. Was that you who said that? You were the one who had that statistic.
One made it to 14.
One made it to 14 years out of 336. And you guys come to A meetings, you think like everybody stays sober forever. One out of 200 maybe makes it for 20 years. And you want to know something? I've been around long enough so I know that for the one person that makes it for 20 years, it's like half of them are nuts. They're still crazy, you know what I mean? Maybe more than half are still crazy. See, that's the difference. I know people say things, well, time doesn't mean anything. Yeah, we'll get you some. I'll tell you what, go get 30, 40 years, you know? Sponsor some people with 25, 30 years. You know, you be on the phones and you'll find out what the deal is. You have a different perspective. That's why it says the way we get a new perspective is repeated humiliations and the final crushing. So if you had 40 years, for instance, and for the last 10 years or 20 years, whatever it is, you were constantly on the phone with people with over 20 years who were sucking in the muzzle of a gun, going to meetings, sponsoring people, picking up medallions, doing all that stuff, you know what I mean? Wives and families, doing all sorts of self-defeating crazy shit, you know what I'm talking about? If you were on the phone with them, and you saw them drinking, you saw guys with 22 years drinking. I mean, I go to meetings, there's probably one of my friends is on a meeting right now, he had 22 years and he drank. Solid guy, smart guy. You know what I mean? I know there's a lot of people I know that have, there may be a few here, who had like 5, 10, 15, 20 years that drank again. They said, well, they obviously didn't do the first step. Oh, yeah, they went to meetings for 15 years. They never did the first step. I mean, we wouldn't even need the steps. Just need a bumper sticker or something. You know what I mean? There's something going on. But you see, if you have the time and you see what's actually going on from a distance, you know what I mean? When you see what's going on, you hear people in the room saying, well, if you go to meetings, the reason people drink is because they don't go to meetings. You know that's not true. You know, I mean, you might want to ask yourself, why do they stop going to meetings? That's another thing. But I mean, there are plenty of people in AA that drink while going to meetings. Or if they don't drink, they start popping Xanax, or they go to some doctor because they're not feeling good or they're not happy. The big book says here and there once in a while, a form of drinking, sober at the moment, says feel better, look better, having a better time. We laugh at such Sally. We know he's going to try the old game again because he's not happy with his sobriety. Soon to know loneliness as few do. He'll be at the jumping off place. And, I think they're talking about somebody with 3 months. But it doesn't say somebody with 3 months. It says it could have 40 years. It says there will come a time in every alcoholic's life where he'll have no defense against the first drink. His defense has to come from God. There he is again. So I say, well, he must be talking about somebody with 6 months. No, he could be talking with somebody with 40 years. There'll come a time. There may be more than one time. There may be 17 times. There may be a time when he's got 5 years. There may have a time. But his one defense comes from being smart? No, I don't think so. So what does this have to do with anything? Well, maybe I'll tie it all together. We'll see how this works. This is my own experience. So 48 years ago, maybe 50 years ago, I think it was more like 50 years ago, I was 25 years old. I remember this like it was yesterday. There's most of the stuff in my life, I don't remember what I had for lunch today, But I remember this one thing. It's very strange. I hardly ever talk about it at meetings. Not that it's bad. It just came up during this thing. I had a police officer. I was a division chief of the state's attorney's office, a major crimes prosecutor. A former detective came up to me. It was in a bank, the way I remember it, and we ran into each other. And he had been hearing me talk to somebody, complaining about something. I was complaining about something. You guys ever complain about anything to people? No. You ever sit in a bar with people and complain? Say, my boss is such a jack. You ever complain? And this is what he said to me, because he liked me. He said, Russ, I need to tell you something. I was a young guy, 25 years old. I thought I was hot shit, because I was smart. I was a major crimes prosecutor and everything. He said, Russ, let me tell you something. People are not attracted to complainers or whiners. He says, don't whine or complain. People are attracted to people that don't complain. There's something about that. And I remember he told me that. I remember like it was yesterday. It must have hit a note somehow at that time. And I guess he heard me whining to somebody or complaining to somebody. I guess I filed it way back in my brain, but I didn't understand what he was talking about. Because I wasn't a complainer. I wasn't a whiner. As a matter of fact, I was no different than all the guys I hung out with in the bars. I was just like everybody else I hung out with in the bars. I didn't complain. We just talked about other people and talked about stuff that was going on and talked about how screwed up everything was and stuff like that. We weren't complainers. We weren't whiners. We weren't thumb-sucking crybabies. I wasn't any different than all the guys I hung out with. Everybody I hung out with talked like I did. They all thought like I did. I wasn't a complainer. So I'm in Alcoholics Anonymous, and here's a sort of strange deal. And I don't know how this happened. Maybe it's a God thing. Maybe it's because of the bottom I hit. You ever hear the saying in AA, don't put anybody on a pedestal? I believe that. I know what that's about. Because, like, if you put me on a pedestal, for instance, don't be doing that, because, believe me, I'm nuts. But if you put me on I'll tell you one thing about me. No matter what you see in me that you like, or even if you're attracted to what I have to say or something like that, I can tell you this has nothing to do with me, because I'm an evil, crazy son of a bitch. It has to do with God, my understanding, which for me is Jesus. It has to do with my God and my faith. Because you should have seen me before he got a hold of me. Trust me, you should have seen me when the guy saw me complaining. You know what I'm talking about? Mm-hmm. So it has nothing to do with me. And the truth is, the greatest thing in my life is I know that. In the book Alcoholics Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous number 3, let me read it out of the book so I'm not bullshitting you about this. And it must be conference approved because it's in the book. I might die or something. Let me see this. Alcoholics Anonymous number 3. That's Bill Dotson. Alcoholics Anonymous number 3 was built. That's the guy in the bed. Bill and Bob are sitting next to him. They're holding the Bible and they're talking. That's 1935. It says, this is page 191. I'm not making this shit up. I want you to think about what I'm about to say in terms of this whole God thing. And the reason I'm talking about the God thing is because we're on the 6th step. The step that separates the men from the boys, the women from the girls. The the children from the grown-ups. That's what we're on. What separates the children from the grown-ups? You think it's the fourth step or the fifth step? No, it's the sixth step and the seventh step. It's called old-timer step. So here's what it says. It would be hard to estimate how much AA has done for me. I really wanted the program. I'll bet most of the people in here would say that. AA's done a lot for you. You go to gratitude meetings, say how grateful you are. I really wanted the program. I'll bet you guys really want the program. That's why you're here. And I wanted to go along with it. I'll bet you guys want to go along with the program. You want to do the program. You want everything the program has, That's what I wanted. I wanted to do everything the program had. I wanted the program. I would do anything they say in the big book, except the only things I didn't like is the stuff I didn't want to do. But, that's the way we are, right? We'll do anything except the stuff we don't want to do because it's too drastic. I noticed, now this is what he noticed. He says, I noticed that others, we don't know who those other are, but apparently there are other people, and there are people in AA. There are people in AA. I found that to be true. I noticed that the others seem to have such a release, a happiness, something that I thought a person ought to have. I don't know what that is. I mean, I do know what it is, because I noticed it too. I noticed that others seem to have a release, a happiness, something I thought a person ought to have. When I came in for the first 5 years, 10 years, I was relatively happy. My life was better and everything like that. I could speak at meetings. I was sponsoring people. I was doing all sorts of stuff. But I noticed that there were people in AA that had something I didn't have. And most of those people had 30 or 40 years. They were different. I was trying to find the answer. I knew there was more. There was even more. When you first come into AA, what you want is you want not to drink. That's what's attractive, because you don't want to drink, and you see a lot of people not drinking. And so what do? You hang around a lot of people that are not drinking. They tell you things like, don't drink even if your ass falls off. They tell you things. If you've gone through the whole day and you feel, I've done everything wrong, but you haven't had a drink, you're a winner. They tell you everything revolves around the drinking. We celebrate, we have a cake if somebody picks up a medallion. Everything's about the drinking, Oh, you raped 3 nuns and killed a penguin, yay, but you haven't had a drink, pick up a medallion, Everything is just drinking or not drinking, and that's the whole thing. But every once in a while, if you're lucky, I was fortunate, I was blessed, you look around and you see there's a guy or a gal or someone, it's not a lot of people, there's somebody, and sometimes he's the guy you're waiting to hear from. You're in a group of 50 people and everybody's listening, then there's this guy, and you say, and you're just waiting to hear what Joe has to say. Because Joe always says something like amazing. And you say, where the hell did he come up with that shit? You know what I mean? How do you think of that? That's like amazing, And so you're waiting, everybody else is talking, you're listening, you're talking, but you're waiting to see what Joe has to say. It says, I was trying to find the answer, and I knew there was even more, something that I hadn't got. And I remember one day, a week or two after I'd come out of the hospital, Bill Wilson was at my house talking to my wife and me. We're eating lunch, and I was listening and trying to find out why they had this release that they seemed to have. I don't know, the rocket ship to the fourth dimension, the experience much of heaven, the knowing peace, maybe not complaining, maybe about maybe it's the joy of living. Something other than just not drinking. Bill Wilson, after 21 years, calls it emotional sobriety. Why they had this release. Bill looked across at my wife and said, Henrietta, the Lord has been so wonderful to me, curing me of this terrible disease that I just want to keep talking about it and telling other people. I think I have the answer. He heard that one line. He says, I think I have the answer. It actually does have to do with the steps, but it really had nothing to do with the steps. It wasn't a step. It was just a statement. You know what the statement was? This was the statement. The Lord has been so wonderful to me, curing me of this terrible disease that I just want to keep talking about it and telling other people. And this is what he says. I think I have the answer. Bill was very, very grateful that he had been released from this terrible thing, and he had given God the credit for having done it. And he's so grateful about it, he wants to tell other people about it. He's so grateful, that's all he wants to talk about. That sentence, the Lord has been so wonderful to me, curing me of this terrible disease, that I just want to keep telling other people about it, has been a sort of golden text for the A program for me. By the way, just offhand, there's a part of the book that says we never apologize for God. All men of faith have courage. Courage is the ability to go through life without complaining, I think, and overcoming fear. All men of faith have courage. Men don't have faith. What did it say in the book of James? It said you must be convinced. Convinced. The man who's not convinced, the man who has doubt, will receive nothing. Can't expect to receive nothing. He's like a wave in the ocean, unstable in all his ways. It's all the same deal. It says, what does it say? It says, you never apologize for God. All men of faith have courage. They trust their God. This is crazy. You see, you know why I pause? Because this is the most serious thing in the program. The problem with pausing like this is it sounds like I'm serious about God. And according to most of the people in A, that means I'm killing newcomers. But let them die. That's what I say. Because if they don't like it, and if they leave because of the God thing, believe me, they're leaving anyway. But you may save some guy with 11 years who's about to drink and trying to figure out the answer. All men of faith have courage. They trust their God. We never apologize for God. They say it again. That's why I don't apologize for talking about it. Instead, we let him demonstrate in our lives what he's done for us. At once, we begin to outgrow fear. At once. How would you like to outgrow fear? So, here's the story. So I got a call the other day. I get these calls all the time. I get 2 or 3 calls a day like this the other day. All the time. And it's a guy with like 17 years. I'm not breaking anonymity because you don't know who he is, and I don't know who he is, and I don't remember, and he could be listening or not. He's 17 years, 18, long time. It wouldn't matter if I said 27 years because I get him with 27 years with the same thing going on. I get guys with 27 years, with 32 years, with 35 years, with 16 years, with 8 years, you know what I mean? And they're all going to meetings. If I remember correctly, this guy was going to 5 meetings a week. And there's other people that go to like 10 meetings a week, and they're sponsoring people. They're doing all the steps. And starts talking to me about something that's going on in his life that's driving him crazy. A circumstance. You ever have a circumstance in your life that's like driving you crazy, that you can't stop thinking about it, and you're worried about it and everything like that? And so I let him talk for about, 4 or 5 minutes. And I mean, I know what the problem is. I absolutely know what the problem is. He doesn't know what the problem is. He's calling me up, presumably, because he wants to know my take on things. I always give people the benefit of the doubt that they're calling me not to vent or not for attention, but they actually want to know an answer. Most of the time I'm wrong. They don't want an answer. They just want to get it off their chest. Or if they want an answer, I'm not going to be giving them the answer they want. I can promise you that. And so after 5 minutes or 6 minutes, or I get to the point where I just can't take it anymore, and, like, no, there's more. I said, I'll bet there is. He says, let me tell you. I said, I'm sure there is, okay? But we've been on the phone for 15 minutes. I pretty much get the point. I get the point. I said, let me tell you what your problem is. He says, what? He says, you're afraid. He said, no, you don't understand. So then I got to go through the no, you don't understand. I said, no, listen, I've been through this deal. You're scared. He says, no, you don't understand. You have fear. You're fearful. He says, no, you don't. But this is what's happening. I said, I know you're scared. I know because I've been there. I know you're petrified. You're doing everything in Alcoholics Anonymous, and you're doing all this stuff, and you were sure to tell me that you're the superstar in AA. We started off the conversation, you told me all the stuff you're doing in AA, which I guess is supposed to stop me from telling you need to do more stuff. I mean, that's a great strategy. You tell me how wonderful you're doing in AA, you're doing all the stuff in AA, to prevent me from telling you that there's something fucking wrong with you. You know what I mean? And you need to do more. And I get that. I understand. I appreciate that. Okay? But let me tell you something. You're scared. Let me tell you something else. If I was to give you the golden answer right now, give you the answer that would solve your problem. So you know exactly what to do. If I was to give you the answer, tomorrow you would be calling me up with another problem. You know why? Because you're unstable. I know you got 27 years, 17 years, 10 years, 15 years, 30 years, but you're scared and you're afraid and you don't know how to get rid of it. As a matter of fact, you're in even worse shape because you don't even know how to talk about it in the meetings because you got 17 years, and how can you talk about it in the meetings when you're the one who's chairing the meeting, when everybody's looking up to you? You're even scared that people will find out that you're scared. That's why you called me from Vancouver, some guy you don't even know, he doesn't know you, because you figure if you call me, nobody will find out, because you're petrified. And if he actually hangs on the phone, and doesn't hang up on me, which sometimes they do, then I say, so how do I solve that? I said, you have no relationship with God. Zero. You don't have to be a rocket scientist. I've read the book. Every time they talk about fear, they talk about God. Every time the Bible talks about fear, it talks about God. Every time James said that, it talks about God. The one interesting thing that I saw in people, in men, that I was really attracted to, part of A will tell you don't put anybody in a pedestal, which is true, to watch out for. But there's another part in A that says something very different. And you're going to have to negotiate between the two. There is a part of A that says this: if you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you're ready to take certain steps. Does anybody remember that?
Sure.
Well, when you initially come into AA, you want what we have. You want to stop drinking. But I'm going to tell you a little secret. There comes an AA where you need something more than that. It's going to be more than not drinking. Some people are going to... See, AA is a great place to hide out. Let me tell you something. If you do all the steps, and you sponsor all the people, and you do all the work, and you show up at all the meetings, AA is a great place to get medallions, hang out with people, and avoid having a relationship with God. It's the greatest place in the world. As a matter of fact, if God forbid you start thinking about the God thing and you talk about it, some well-meaning AAer will come up to you and say, we don't talk about that shit here. You're killing newcomers. They'll get you back into the fold. You know what I mean? Just, no, don't talk about the God thing because you're making me uncomfortable now. You know what I mean? Just don't drink and go to meetings and do the steps and sponsoring people. I mean, how can you argue against that? That's like mother and apple pie, but don't talk about the God thing. And here's the deceiving thing. Alcoholism loves this shit. Because the deceiving thing is if you do that, you can stay physically sober for 15, 20, 25, 30 years. You know? And then one day you end up drinking or committing suicide or becoming a basket case and you don't know what's going wrong. Because where do you go? I heard a gal say in the meeting, I think it was Dea said, I don't know who said it, but it was the right thing because this is the way she said it. She says, what meeting do you go to when the meetings aren't working anymore? Now, the meetings are probably working for you, but there may come a time in your life, and it may be after you have 17 years or 20 years, and there are some people here who have hit that deal, where the meetings stop working for you, where just sponsoring one more people ain't going to work for you. All it's going to do, it's like an aspirin. It may get you through that one day, you know what I mean? But the next day you're still going to have the fear. And then if you get old enough in AA, you get to have the fear of cancer, and you get the fear of other things, you know what I mean? Some serious stuff. That there's going to come a time in every alcoholic's life where he'll have no defense against the first drink, no defense against fear. His defense has to come from God, and he don't got that. Because you can become so busy in AA, doing so many things in AA, that you forget the only thing that's important, because there's only one thing you really need. You know, the big book says, that's why we wrote this book. So that to show you how you could develop a faith and a power that would solve your problem. It says it right in the book. He says, the whole reason we wrote this book is so that you would develop a faith. We're not talking about a doubt, a faith, being convinced in a power that will solve your problem. What happens when you do all the activity and all the stuff and everything like that, but you have no relationship with God? You have a concept. You say, oh, yeah, I believe in God. You believe in a concept. But it's not like something you can have a relationship with. Yeah, I can't have a concept. Is like a thing. It's like my car. My car is an it. You know what I mean? My shoes are an it. You know, I mean, but yeah, I mean, I can have a relationship with Otto. I know Otto. I see Otto. I can have a relationship with him. Call him up on the phone. But if all you have is a concept, and alcohol, you know, so that, and in AA, you can get away with that. You can say, oh, yeah, I believe in God. But then you get into your car and you check your bank account and you look at your weight on the scale, and, you know, but most of the day, basically, what you believe in is yourself. That's what they call playing God. He's not the central fact of your life, you know, that kind of thing. So what happened is the men that I was attracted to, who was I attracted? I don't know who you are attracted to. Now, there are women that are like this, but I was mostly attracted. These were the men that I noticed that were steady. They were steady. They were authentic and steady, and you knew they had some sort. I always talk about the one guy I talk about, although I knew many people like this. They're few and far between, but the one guy I talked about was Al Kennedy. Many of you guys have heard that Al Kennedy story, where this guy I'd never seen before. He had about 40 years, 70 years old. Gives an hour-long share. He was absolutely incredible. You know, I said, man, that's a man's man. I wish I could be like him. He was unconcerned, and it wasn't like he was worried about what people. He was just saying, "This is who I am, whether you like it or not." You know, in the book it says fear of people and economic insecurity will leave you. You know, I was always worried about what people were going to think about me, or what they did think about me, or, you know, why did I say this, or I should have said that, or they misunderstand me, or, you know, I was always like had self-doubt, second guessing myself, unstable in all my ways. Although I wouldn't tell you that, I'll let you see that. Always worried about the money thing and all. So many things to worry about. 5 years, 10 years sober. After a while, that shit catches up with you. You can only hold it together for so long and make believe you're okay. And after a while, it catches up to you, and you're like in a blind alley, and you got no place to go. And it's not like you can go to an AA meeting and talk about it, because you can't go to an AA meeting with 20 years sobriety. You know, with all these words and everything, and say, I have 20 years of sobriety, I think I want to drink. That ain't going to happen, because you're too worried about what other people think about you. You just really totally blocked yourself off from everything. But these guys that I would see, they were always like steady. They were always the same. It was almost like, here's what I thought about these guys. I thought, when I'd see a Joe Snyder or a John Glenn or one of these guys, I said, these guys obviously don't have any problem. They've got millions of dollars in the bank. They have sex every night with Marilyn Monroe. You know what I mean? They have the greatest health in the world. They got the greatest life in the world. Everything is going okay. That's why they are so steady all the time. Why people are always talking to them, because they always were the same. Yesterday, today, tomorrow, they were solid. They were the same. And you could talk to them, and they obviously didn't have any problems, and they were at peace with themselves. But then I'd find out, like the Al Kennedy deal, that they were they'd be dying of terminal cancer. You know, they didn't have any money. They didn't have a place to stay, you know, but they were the same. In other words, the circumstances of their lives, they may not have liked it. I'm not saying they were jumping up and down saying, they may not have liked the circumstances, but it had no effect on who they were or their inner peace. it had no effect on their peace. They were not scared in the way I was scared or worried about. I mean, they knew they had problems. I've had cancer 3 times, okay? And so I know what it's like to have something happen to you, and that's actually the smallest shit that has happened to me. I've had a lot. Listen, I raised 4 kids. I got 8 grandkids. I'm self-supporting through my own contributions most of the time. You know, I'm married. I've had the same problems everybody else is having in this thing. I know the difference between having paralyzing, overwhelming fear, waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning, worried about everything, what's going to happen. I know the difference between that and having things that go on in your life. And life goes on 24/7 and not have it affect you. Forget about not drinking. I mean, don't forget not drinking is important, of course. But I mean, not even affect the way you deal with people, how you think about yourself. Just be able to go one step at a time and just handle life with grace. Those are the guys I hung out with. And most of those guys were not in the parking lot smoking cigarettes. You know, they were the guys that were 70, 80 years old, 60 years old. They had 25, 30, 40 years sobriety. Those are the guys I hung out with. I got a guy who calls me up. And this is a true story. It just happened today. And so I had the conversation with him that I'm having with you. Because think about it. And I'm not doing this because I'm trying to sell God to somebody. I'm just telling him, this guy's asking for help. I'm telling him what works. Because I've been through it. I said, you want to know what the problem is. You're going to meetings, you're sponsoring 10 people, you're doing everything in the world, and you're worried. And you're scared about something that came up in your life, but it really is you're just scared. You're just upsettable and scared, and you want to know how you're going to get rid of it. And this isn't the only time this has happened to you. Last week it was another thing. And 2 months ago it was something else. He says, and you want to know what the problem is. You have no relationship with God. You've managed to do AA so much and stay in so long in the fellowship of the problem, in the fellowship of the drinking fellowship. We're all love each other, and we all feel like we're similar because we all are alcoholics. And we all might drink, and we don't want to drink. But you see, there's another fellowship in AA. And you've never been a part of that fellowship. It's called the Fellowship of the Spirit. Fellowship of the drunks, you know, the only requirement is the desire to stop drinking. You've never really been involved in the Fellowship of the Spirit. Did you know that there are people in AA where they go to AA meetings, they don't talk about drinking? Did you know that? Have I even mentioned drinking? You know there's a fellowship in AA where all they do is talk about God. You know? That's all they do. Nobody says, oh, well, if they had said that to me, I would have walked out the door. Nobody says you're killing newcomers. All they do is talk about God. You know why? Because they want to live a fearless life. They want to live a turned over life. So I said, that fellowship exists. I said, I will send you an email where you can go to meetings, the Zoom meetings, where there's 20, 30 meetings a week with that fellowship from people all over the world, and all they do is talk about getting closer to God. I said, that's what I did. I just hung around with the men that weren't complaining and weren't whining. That's one of the things that happened to me. I'm not saying that's the way it happened, but that's what I did. So I'll send you that email. And you can just, from the privacy, you can go on that thing. And he says, this is what the guy says. I already get your email. I said, you get my email with all the meetings, the spiritual meetings? And he says, yeah. I said, well, then you must have talked to me before. He says, yeah, like a year ago. And I sent you the email where those meetings are. He says, yeah. I said, it's so outrageously alcoholic. It's so great. I love it. I said, well, why, if we had this conversation before, and I sent you the email, why didn't you go to the meetings? He says, I don't like Zoom. I said, how old are you? He said, 57. I said, why are you wasting my time? Why are you wasting my time? That's what I said. Why are you wasting my time? We had this conversation a year ago. I sent you all the information. We're having it again a year later. Why are you wasting my time? That sounds pretty harsh, right? If you're not prepared to be harsh with alcoholics, you're going to kill them. If you're so worried about what they think about you that you don't want to tell them the truth, and maybe even hurt their feelings, they might as well talk to the fucking wall. Because you're more worried about yourself and whether they like you, which is unfortunately part of being an alcoholic, depending upon whether or not you're popular with people, than to tell them something that may hurt their feelings but may save their ass in the long run. Why are you wasting my time? So he says, I'm going to start going to the meetings. He says, okay, I'll see you there. You let me know you're there and I'll see you. I mean, sometimes if you don't change the direction you're walking, you're going to wind up where you're headed. Now, I know there comes a time where stuff happens to you and you're worried, and how do I get out and how do I do that, and you don't even realize it. If there's one thing alcoholics don't realize, it is, what is it? Isn't it about alcohol? I mean, how many years did it take you to realize that you had a problem with alcohol and that your life was unmanageable? 10 years, 20 years? And then when you finally realized it, did there ever come a time you realized your actual life became unmanageable 10 years before you realized it became unmanageable? Because alcoholics find it so easy to live in misery because they're in denial and delusional. Their alcoholic's life seems the only normal life. They can't separate the true from the false. How easy it is for an alcoholic to live a miserable existence and think they're doing okay. I mean, if you haven't learned how to live a miserable existence and feel like you're doing great, then you don't have the same disease I have. You know? I have a disease that tells me everything's okay, there's no problem, don't change anything. You know, you're doing great, you know? And sometimes, you know, it takes a long time to get to the point where you somehow realize you're walking in the wrong, but if you keep on walking in that direction, you're going to eventually wind up where you're headed. You don't want to wind up where you're headed. You run into some guy, some gal, something, you bump into somebody, and all of a sudden you change your direction like 2 degrees, and you wind up in a different direction. And then somebody says to you, well, how did you wind up here? I said, I don't know, I bounced into this guy at a meeting, he told me to go there, and then all of a sudden just go there. Sometimes you just have to change your fellowship and your association. That's right. You know, if you get to the point where you're 15 years after reading this book, and what's in the book, you know what I mean? I'm talking about what's in AA. You don't have to go far from AA. The big book, the 12 and 12, Dr. Bob the Girls. If you haven't figured out that God has a major player in getting rid of fear, and if you don't realize you're in fear, and that's your real problem, not the drinking, it's the thinking, if you don't realize that, how many years and decades do you have to go along before you realize that, and also all somehow put together that part in the book that says, at once we begin to outgrow fear. All men of faith have courage. You know, I know AA has a way of saying the big book, because we don't want to hurt, God forbid, newcomers. We're so sensitive, of sort of talking to you about God without like offending you, because they're so worried you're going to be offended. So they just mention them 380 times in the book and put them on the board and everything, but they say, but don't worry about that. Don't worry about that stuff. We're just throwing that in there. Yeah, I don't even know why we put it in there, but we're going to put it in there anyway, you know? How long do you have to get? How miserable do you have to get before all of a sudden you said, man, I read that a million times. I never thought of it that way. Man, how many, you walk out here and say, man, I never thought of that. Yeah, they do say that. It says once we begin to outgrow fear. How many people would like to live a fearless life? How would you like to wake up in the morning and not have anxiety? How would you like to not wake up in the middle of the night and have anxiety? What would your life be like if you really didn't worry about what people thought about you? What would your shares be like if you didn't worry about what you said or what you were going to say? Let's say you just shared whatever's on your mind without even thinking about it and didn't worry about what people thought about you. Can you even envision a life like that? Now, you may not be able to envision a life like that, but then again, you were at a point one time where you couldn't envision not drinking. Anybody at a point that couldn't envision, I can't envision not drinking. And now you're not drinking. So I say to you, how about a life without fear of people in AA walking up to you and saying, don't do this or don't do that or you're killing you or whatever these people criticize. I mean, this ain't exactly Well People's Anonymous. You understand what I mean? You're worried about some guy sitting next to you who isn't even paying your visa bill, you know, and he's going to be drunk next week, you know, or something like that. What would it be like to live a fearless life, a life without fear? Because after you come into AA, the drinking may be gone, but the next step is relief from fear. That's what the promise is. Lose fear of people and economic insecurity. That's what the new freedom is. That's what the rocket in the fourth dimension is. You know, that's the deal. And that's the sixth step. You know why? And I'm going to end it this way, what they say in the sixth step. They say this is the step that separates the men from the boys. And this is what it says. You can look it up. It says the men are those men who are sincerely trying to grow in the image and likeness of their Creator.
Amen.
That's the definition of the sixth step. Trying to grow in the image and likeness of their Creator. Yeah. So that's why I say, that's how you handle it. You say, well, let me ask something. You're doing all these things. You're sponsoring all these people. Are you trying to grow in the image and likeness of your Creator? Well, I don't know. Well, that's the sixth step, right? You've been here 15 years. He says, so who's your Creator? What do you mean? Well, how can you grow in the image and likeness of your Creator if you don't know who your Creator is? Well, I don't know what you're talking about. He says, God. Who's God? Who's your God? He says, well, he's like God. Oh, so you don't know. You have no idea. It's just some concept somewhere. What if I told you there were people that it wasn't so fuzzy or ambiguous to them? They actually believed they had a relationship with God and they think about Him all the time. And He's the essential fact of their life. He's the essential fact of their lives. Do you know that there are guys like that exist? You can tell who they are. They're not complaining. They don't complain a lot. So thank you. That's all I have to say.